Hello, and welcome to Fabrically Speaking Live. I'm your host, Claire Rowley, and I just ran from the other room. So, apologize for my heavy breathing. It is autumn today, isn't it? I believe today is the first day of autumn. Am I correct? If I am, give me a thumbs up. Hi, Carlene, Judy, Tina, Madeline, Pamela, Sylvia, Judy again. Whew. So I have no idea what I'm doing. I tried really hard to get my equipment to work today, but it is still not agreeing with me. So maybe I will have more time this week to get that finalized. Meanwhile, what do you guys want me to do today? Want me to do some free motion? Or maybe some piecing, some traditional piecing, because I have the jelly roll from last week when I made the bowl cozy, and I was thinking I wouldn't mind having a nice little placemat to go with it. Turns out I've decided that is perfect for holding my remote controls by my couch, so it is not going to be my bowl cozy for my bowl after all. And so if you follow exactly what I did last week, you'll have a great remote control holder for beside your couch, in addition to the deeper bowls. I was reorganizing things because I will be auctioning the butterfly machine that you see here on the table. And you can see the extension that goes around it is also painted. I painted over 300 hours on that, and there is a video that supports that as well. I believe if you go into my this and that playlist on YouTube, you can watch me paint that in 4 minutes. So 300 hours condensed down to 4 minutes. It's quite something. And I'm thinking of auctioning it off next month. So if you're interested in that, be sure to join the school. I will be having you guys pre-register in order to be a part of the auction. We have to make sure you really want to do it so that we have a more enjoyable time. And the auction will take place within the school, create.clairerowley.com. And at the end of the show today, there will be a image that pops up with that address. Meanwhile, if you go to the top of the chat, you will see the link. So if you're interested in having a chance to be a part of the auction on my butterfly machine, which is one of my favorite sewing machines, I actually painted it with oil paint. And it is sealed, I think, better than the machines themselves come. You don't have to worry about it scratching at all. And it is still a fully functional, maintained machine. So you can actually use it if you want as well. And it is a machine capable of doing everything that you see me do here on Fabrically Speaking Live. So be sure to join that. I will be creating a group inside of the school as soon as possible to have you guys kind of come into that before we go ahead and have that. And it'll be my first time just doing a video inside of the school and not having it be a public video. So we'll be trying out something new at the same time. So what do you guys think? Last week I did some foundation style of quilting as you go. And so I think it might be fun to do a little piecing today. If you guys have suggested anything, I have not seen it yet. Hi, Robin. I'm still winded, man. I was running. By the way, I've started the voiceover on my novel, Beyond the Brushstrokes, and I was almost ready to share the first chapter with you at the end of this video, but I'm going to also have that inside of the school. So if you want to pre-order a copy of my novel, Beyond the Brushstrokes, which is not a sewing book. It is an actual novel. So if you like to read, be sure to also join in the school there. And we'll have the Audible version and also Kindle and print as well. A lot going on. Trying to get it all of this to happen before the end of the year. So fingers crossed. So this is some of the most, I think it's really very seasonal. It looks to me like a little bit like fall fabrics. Do you agree? It's not as good as that placemat up on the wall, which there is a video inside of the Fabrically Speaking playlist. It's actually more than one video where I teach you all of the steps that you need to do in order to complete that placemat. So great project for your fall table and or all the way into Thanksgiving. What do you guys want me to do? Want me to piece? I haven't seen anyone say anything about what you want me to do. See, it's not easy to come up with an idea every day. So piecing would be nice. Lorinda, thank you. All right, here we go. So, and I know Carlene is working on something today that requires an overlock stitch. And if I'm correct, Carlene, you don't have a serger, right? You'll be using a regular Brother sewing machine. So I'm thinking maybe I can show you that you can piece with also a overlock stitch on your machine. So say you really want to make sure your quilt stays together. You have little ones that jump up and down on their quilt. So I'm going to piece using a straight stitch, and then I'm going to piece using an overlock stitch. And if you have a sewing machine with overlock stitches, I think you're going to love seeing how well this foot works for use on overlocking. If you want to sew t-shirts and sweatshirts and minky, any kind of fabric that has a lot of stretch in it, use our liquid base glue to put those two fabrics together, and it locks the stretch in the fabric and will allow you to use your traditional sewing machine like a serger, except for you don't have to use a quarter, you don't have to cut the fabric as you sew. You can cut and have that peace of mind of knowing that it is perfectly sized, and then sew it with your traditional sewing machine. And a regular sewing machine is a lock stitch, so it's stronger and more secure than using a serger. I believe Ayako is going to be launching some wedding veils and possibly napkins, as I was speaking about. So maybe I'll show you a little edge stitch as well on how you can make your own napkins to stand out so that your napkins are worth more than anybody else's on Etsy or any other auction site or sale site that you may be involved in. This is how I was breathing yesterday. I apologize for that. I think I'm going to use my inhaler, which I don't like to use all the time. Do that. I'm going to mute and do that so I can breathe better. I usually have an inhaler in here. Let's see. Maybe not. I can't mute that easy because my buttons aren't working still. Oh boy. All right. So I will play you some music and be right back and grab my inhaler so I can function better for you. I will be right back. Okay, I can breathe now. Hopefully I won't be dizzy. And then I'd be called a dizzy blonde. We don't want that. Why won't the chat stay down on the bottom? It's acting weird. All right, come on. There we go. Okay. Yes, can you imagine all the quilts that are out there and they're made with just a straight stitch? Just that little vulnerable straight stitch. How many of you have a quilt where you built the whole quilt on the bed and now all the stitching is breaking? The fabric itself is not cut, but the stitching line is actually broken. And that's because when you sew fabrics together, it stretches, and your thread, if it's polyester, cotton, or rayon, does not stretch at all. Nylon will stretch, which is why I recommend lingerie thread for piecing children's quilts together, because it's going to be stronger. You have 20-year-old fabric. Ooh. So you've had this dream of sewing for a very long time then. Let's see. Close camera. Functioning without my little button thing. For those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I'm the inventor of the Creative Feet line of sewing machine products. And this is the foot I'll be showing today. This is the Satinedge Foot. If you have seen us on Facebook, you've probably seen this foot. It's out there a lot. And I'm going to show you, we also have the Pearls and Piping Foot, which I used last week in conjunction with the Satinedge Foot to make bowl cozies. This is the one to sew an edge stitch around thick quilted items. And if you have a sewing machine and you have a normal snap-on adapter, you'll snap the foot right onto your machine. If your machine does not have the correct width snap-on adapter, if yours is wider or skinnier, then you'll select from one of the included adapters that come with our feet. I'm trying to find the sequin and ribbon foot. This is the sequins and ribbon foot. So there are 3 presser feet in the Creative Feet collection, and these 3 feet can do over 88 different things, which is why I have a 208-page workbook and a 2-hour instructional video to support just these 3 feet. The sequins and ribbon foot also has additional guides available, the 3/8" guide and the 1/8" guide, which is on this foot already. So you have the ability to sew a wide variety of different trims with the sequins and ribbon foot, including all sizes of elastic. And it changes your experience with elastic tremendously. If you have a Bernina sewing machine, you'll use a Bernina adapter in addition to our shortest adapter. And then it turns your Bernina into a universal snap-on foot machine. So you can then take and snap off our feet and put on another foot, and you can also use other feet from other machines on your sewing machine. Yep, pretty cool, huh? All right. So the Satinedge foot has this little wire inside of the presser foot's opening. It's actually connected to that white guide, and it has this nut, which is snug, very snug. Not to be confused with a traditional blind hem foot, which has a really easy to move nut and the feet are made of metal. This is a stronger foot because it is not metal. I know a lot of people think that plastic is not as strong as metal, but I used to have my feet made out of metal when I first came out with them, and the screws and nut assembly would just fall off. The metal was too soft. And the same metal used for your traditional feet on your machine was used. I cleaned up and I put my measuring tape away. So to set this foot up for a 1/4" seam allowance, and I'll do that first and then I'll show you the overcasting or overlocking, I'm going to position my needle in its left needle position and line up the needle with one of the lines on the measuring tape. Oh, I've never thought of doing it this way. Can you do it without putting it under the foot? Trying something new after 35 years. By the way, it is our 35th year anniversary. It was actually last month. I was a little distracted last month and completely missed talking about our 35th anniversary. So there is a sale going on at Creative Feet right now. And I think, I can't remember does anyone remember the coupon code? If you do, can you type it into the chat? I think I announced it in the school. I can't remember. I haven't been getting enough sleep lately. So we bring our needle down. This is still the easiest way. Lower your needle so that it hovers over one of the lines on the measuring tape. And then you turn the nut, moving the guide over to the 1/4 inch mark. If a pattern calls for scant 1/4 inch, you can go back scant and achieve a scant 1/4 inch as well. So first, the traditional method. And we want to bring right sides together. Remember, right sides, if you stretch it, it concaves. It concaves to the wrong side, so that's the wrong side. Flip it over. Stretch it. And with the Creative Feet and with the liquid-based glue, you will not have jelly roll growth. If you don't know what that is. People piece with jelly rolls, and if you don't rotate normally, if you don't alternate, sew it this way, and then the next one you would flip over the jelly roll and start from the other end and work the other way, and then alternate the next one again. In essence, flipping your entire piece, your quilt, over and over again so that you are not constantly sewing down the same direction from that main piece of fabric. With the liquid-based glue, it locks it in and you can go and just keep building it in a more logical manner. Isn't that neat? So I'll show you the liquid-based glue, but I'm going to show you also it without it so you can see that you don't have to use it to piece without having your fabrics shift on you. The Satinedge Foot is what will do the guiding rather than me having to lean down and look. I use my elbow pads and rest my elbows so that I'm not, we have a storm and Chase is wanting to cuddle. He's frightened. Where'd you go? He's making noise. Hopefully he doesn't disconnect anything. He gets quite scared during electrical storms. Do you guys have dogs? If you do, what's your dog's names? How many you have? And are they chicken in the storm as well? Tinkerbell just sneezed really loud. Poor thing. I am having allergies as well. So I'm going to bring my fabrics up so they're lined up perfectly. Place this so the guide is off the edge and the guide wire is also off the edge. You can do this with your traditional foot as well, but just remember, with the Satinedge Foot, I am resting my hand on the machine, not moving my hands as I sew. It makes your back feel better to not have to raise your elbows while sewing. Elbows down, shoulders relaxed. Gently push toward the foot, keeping your hand to the side of the foot. And then you can go full speed if you want. You don't have to. Goldie Blue. What a cute name. I sew so fast the machine bounces. It reminds me of older sewing machines, and I used to have like a dressmaker machine. In fact, when I invented this foot, I had people, before I launched them to the world, I taught a bridal veil class, and everybody had to have an old sewing machine. And I taught it with my dressmaker. And when you sewed with that machine, it would vibrate so much that the machine itself would move across the table. I dropped my pillow. All right, so I'm not really building a big thing here. I'm gonna just do a little coaster for my cups when I sit down and watch TV. So I don't need to do a lot. Chihuahua mix. And you can see that seam allowance is maintained all the way down, and I didn't use any of the liquid-based glue for that. One tiny spot, and that's the fabric shifting, not the seam allowance changing. So not too bad at going full speed. Ellen, I didn't call you. I'd still take care of you and get that order. I'm so sorry. Don't hesitate to call me, you guys. I'm a little bit split right now with the novels release, the school's course, the Creative Feed Extensive course opening up also in October. So I'm a little bit loopy, but I'm still here for you. You can still call me up and have a conversation so that we can get you going. These are one of my pressers, and I will be making pressers tomorrow if you're waiting for a presser. I tend to make them on Fridays because it's a dirty process for me to machine them. See how beautiful that is? And now which one do I want to do next? The next one I'm going to use the overlocks, or maybe I should do the glue. So in keeping the fabrics going the same direction so that you can see how the foot does, I want to use another dark fabric. This one's pretty. Right sides together. So this time I'm going to use the liquid-based glue along the edge of the fabric. I'm busy. I'm a little bit crazy right now. I'm just trying to get it all done before the end of the year. You can never call me lazy, that's for sure. So a few dots of glue down about that's about inch and a half. And then before I go too far, I'll slide my finger across to spread it out. You can see how it's just a little bit of a sheen. That's water-soluble stabilizer that's wet. That's all it is. So there's no risk to your sewing machine or to you, and it doesn't damage your fabric. Now I have the foot holding the fabrics together. You could sit down and do all of your gluing all at once if you want. So this one is going to be, once again, the 1/4 inch seam allowance with the glue. And now my hand, I don't have to touch it at all. If the fabric is not touching, if the fabric isn't touching the white guide, then I move it. Otherwise, my hands don't even have to hold on to the fabric. Like, you don't have to hold it. You don't have to keep the two fabrics from shifting or slipping side to side. Now, I didn't wait for that to dry, and that's all I glued. So now I can pull back. And this is kind of how I'll work as I go. I don't necessarily sit down and glue them all and then sew them all. It's kind of like a pin, but there's no pin. So there's no poking yourself, no accidentally bleeding on your quilts. How many of you piece like this now? Do you use the glue, you guys, when you piece? Notice my hands just sitting there, just gently applying a slight amount of pressure to keep the fabric touching the white part of the guide. I still have some glue. Not in front of the foot, not behind the foot, but beside the foot. And the reason for that is if you push to the side of the foot, it pushes back. If your hand's behind it or in front of it, it will bounce off, and then you'll have probably some stretching of your fabric, and you don't want that. I didn't run the air conditioner as long as I usually do, so it's a little bit warm in here. How many of you are under cloudy skies today? The glue on my finger, I just kind of roll it and it falls off. You could have a damp washcloth by you. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Now I got Tinkerbell climbing around my feet. I can't really hear the thunder in here, but they're acting like it's bad. I got my headphone in my ear, so, or my earbud in my ear. Dot, 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 dot. Much quicker than pinning too. I really should have a damp washcloth whenever I do this, because on the camera it looks like my skin's dry and peeling. Sometimes you have heavy rain. It's and oh, you're up north, up a little bit north of us though, Robin. I feel like the whole lower, all the southern states are getting rained on today. It's really nice to get all this rain, but the grass that's growing is really making my sinuses go nuts. So with the ability to piece in this way, you have the option of pressing your seams to one side or opening the seams. If you open your seams, then you can do free motion easier, but stitching in the ditch is more challenging. For a stitch in the ditch, you need to have your fabrics folded over so that you have a little ditch to help guide you. Before I open seams, if I choose to do that, I usually press to one side. It ensures that I have a real good press, and I'm kind of going at an angle and spreading the fabric as I go down. That guarantees that I don't end up with a little pleat, an unexpected pleat, which I tend to get if I use an iron without first pressing with the presser. It is also easier on a flat surface instead of on your sewing machine surface. And there my seam shifted to the other side, so I was able to catch it. A lot easier to feel it with your fingers. And the iron is so easy to burn, you know, so easy to burn yourself with the iron. How many of you burnt yourself with an iron? Have you ever done that? Intermittent rain there, huh, Darlene? How many of you are, I mean, as I get older, I have this very strange sleep schedule. I fall asleep on the couch and then I wake up and then I go for a few more hours and then I go to sleep in the morning. I don't know. It's either a habit that I am going through, or it's just the only way I'm going to get all my projects done by the end of the year. Okay, so now I'm going to use an overlock stitch and explain the difference between an overlock and an overcast. Do any of you know? Do you know? Remember, if you're going to work with stretch fabric and you just put two fabrics together and you use an overlock stitch, well, the fabric's going to move forward and reverse, and it's going to kind of stretch their fabric out of shape. So definitely use a liquid-based glue if you're going to use an overlock stitch on stretch fabric. And I may as well ensure that it doesn't move on me for this also. I'm going to draw for you because it's much easier for your brain to learn with a little bit of an illustration sometimes, rather than seeing it. Kind of narrows your point of view. Here is the fabric's edge. And we have 2 layers of fabric. So you got 2 layers of fabric and you're trying to join them together with a stitch. And we need a seam, we need a stitching line that's going to go like this along to keep those 2 fabrics together, so that when you open it up, because if you were just to do a zigzag stitch along the edge, you would have a very big stitch length, and then the fabrics can spread out and actually flatten, which is kind of like a cover stitch concept. So what I'm going to be using is a stitch. I'm going to find it on my machine so I can draw it. And I think it'll be the same look on your machine, Carlene. It's going to look like a bunch of triangles like this. with a line going down. And what that stitch is going to do is it's going to go forward and back, and it actually moves in a forward, back, over, kind of like a blanket stitch. It does that forward and reverse movement, and it's so strong. So you want to make sure that you're not going to have to rip this stitch out. And on my machine, it is stitch number 1-16. They call it an overcasting stitch, but it is not. It is an overlock stitch. And the reason it's an overlock is because it sews the seam as well as overcasting along the edge. Now, before we go ahead and use this stitch, it's very important that you realize that you have the guide. If you're using my Satinedge Foot, it has this guide and it has a little pin that sticks out. So if the stitch is moving in a pattern going side to side, you want to make sure that the seam allowance is over there and that the triangle goes beyond the guide. So it's going to go beyond the guide. Now, if it doesn't, then you just turn the nut on the foot and that moves the guide left or right. To test it, I'm going to do every stitch of the stitch pattern. Bring the needle down, turning the handle always towards you when doing this as well. So see how it's moving? Now it's going back. And now it's swinging over. So in that swung over position, I make sure it clears the foot. And now I'm going to move the guide wire to the right or to the left of the needle. And now that's going to stop that stitch from pulling the fabric in as we sew. There are other stitches that have more overcasting, and you can use those as well, but just make sure once again that you check by going and doing all movements. And I just did 2 full stitch patterns that way. So now I'm able to go ahead and sew, and this is just in essence a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Did I tighten that? This is like a scant 1/4 inch, but it is a overlocked scant 1/4 inch. So this quilt will never fall apart. And if you use a 40 weight polyester for this, yeah, this isn't going to rot. You're going to be able to give this as a family heirloom and know that it's not going to break apart. Cotton thread rots and it's very weak. So you see how nice that looks? And I'm having a little trouble with the fabric shifting because I didn't glue all the way down. So I'm going to go ahead and glue, because why not have the support of the stabilizer? Why not make it as easy on yourself as you possibly can? This isn't a contest to see who can do the best with the worst situation. It's who ends up with the best project when it's all said and done. And there's no contest, is there? We love one another. Everyone wants everyone to do well. So it's a lot slower to sew with this stitch than an overlock machine. But if you don't have an overlock machine, isn't it exciting to know that you can use your sewing machine as an overlock and have a really beautiful stitch when you're finished? If I were using stretched fabric, I would do a line of glue rather than dots, so that 100% of this fabric is stuck to 100% of that fabric, and then let it actually fully dry before sewing. And that way it locks the stretch fibers in place. And then when it's washed, it just rinses away and the stretch fabric goes back to being stretchy. And you don't even have to wait for it to be washed, because if the fabric stretches, the glue will break, or it will allow the fabric to stretch. It doesn't prevent it. Hi, Amy. How are you? We were all thinking about you. Hi, Karen. Going to have to try that. Looks good. Yeah, nothing like a overlock stitch on a quilt. And this is the Satinedge Foot, found at creativefeet.com. I will, after the show is over, have all the links in the description below. So gentle. Notice my hand never moves. I'm resting my elbows. I'll give you a front view for a second. And bear with me, my little button clicker thingy isn't working. So see the elbow? Well, you can't see because this pillow. My elbow pillow is right here. And I should be centered with my needle, but once again I have my microphone in front of me, which is going to go back to being above as soon as I get a little bit more time, because I have a completely separate recording studio now for doing Audible books. And once I'm done with my novel, I am going to do more books on Audible. Since a lot of you say you like my voice, and Amy, I know you read different kinds of books than I would normally write. So if you have a genre, there's a public domains books site, and I can do audibles on any public domain book, should you want me to do one. I'd love to see what books you like. Carlene's got one lined up for me from the, is it the 1800s, Carlene? Hi, Madeline. And if you're new to the channel and you're seeing me look at my screen while sewing, that is because I designed this foot for a blind sewer. So when you push toward it, it pushes back the other way, and I can sew without even having my eyes open. I get a little woozy when I do that, but I can also just look up, and that's a lot easier. This foot's been sold worldwide for 35 years now. 35 years. Did any of you find the coupon? I think it's 35th. And then I sent out a newsletter yesterday. If you did not receive the newsletter, then make sure you let me know, because you might have accidentally unsubscribed from it. There are people that were automatically unsubscribed from my school because Google thought that Mighty Network's extension of their email, which is mn.co, they thought they were some junk mail kind of thing, because so many emails were going out, because they are the platform my school is built upon, and they send out for us to our list. So, you know, thousands of people inside of the school already, which is a social media kind of school that's free for you. So if you haven't joined yet, it's a lot of fun. Chase is snoring really loud. I guess he's not stressed about the storm anymore. All right, so I'm going to show you the close-up of this, and I'm going to go all the way down so you can see how perfect that is, all the way down. If you see how there's no puckering at all, and that will never fall apart. Your kids, you don't have to worry about people breaking that stitch. All that you'd have to worry about now is the fabric tearing, and the fabric won't tear if you're using the correct needle. So the right needle, or the correct needle style to use for piecing, is a rounded tip, or also known as a light ballpoint needle. When you look at a package of needles, it has an H. That H stands for rounded tip, or light ballpoint needle. So now I can press, and the only issue with using an overlocking stitch for piecing a quilt together is that you cannot spread the seam open. You must have one seam pushed over to the side. So if you like stitching in a ditch, no big deal. The machine behind me, Amy, is the one that I'm auctioning off. I'm scheduling the auction for October. I'll do the tight camera so you can see it up close. See how pretty it is? So that is 300 hours of hand painting. Now, auction isn't like you know, trying to see how cheap we can get it. There is a base price. There is going to be an entrance fee that is refundable. And the reason I'm doing that is to make it so there's no looky-loos just hanging out. So only those that are really serious about participating in the auction. And then I may do some more of these in the future. I might even paint some of the ever-sewn machines and auction those off also. But generally, or what I'm trying to do is fund some more, you know, the stick and rinse stabilizer, get the funding that I need in order to reestablish the inventory on that. Stick and rinse is a stabilizer that kind of behaves like our liquid-based glue, except for it's a tape or a roll of stabilizer. So it's 35th sale, all uppercase. Thanks, Tina. So what I've got here so far, this is 4 different methods of piecing your fabrics together, all done with the Satinedge Foot. So this was the stitch that I did with just the standard 1/4 inch without the glue. Then I did it with the glue. This is the overlocked stitch, not overcast, but overlock. Now, say you want to have your fabrics finished and you've already pieced it together. You chose a really messy fabric that just looking at it, it starts to unravel. Do any of you have anything like that? You have projects where maybe you use taffeta, and taffeta is one of the most, it's almost like it goes insane and it goes blah, and it just unravels in front of you. So you can take and you can actually use a zigzag stitch to overcast your seam after you've already got your 1/4 inch seam allowance set there. So I'll do that. Why does the H stand for a rounded tip? It's so funny. Sorry, it's just I have a lifetime. I have a lifetime in this industry. And if the inventor of the Schmetz universal needle were still alive, I'm sure that he'd agree with me. They decided to change the names of the tips of the needles. In originally, when the universal needle released, he went to the United States, where we had more sewing machines made here than any other country. And as a sewing machine dealer back then, and I was about 17 years old when I met him, and he was trying to stop fabric from fraying because manufacturers of garments would make clothing and then the customer would wear it, and one good stretch of an arm to reach something on a high shelf would cause the fabrics to stretch, just like your quilt will stretch under someone's tush when they sit on the bed and the bed sinks and the fabrics stretch. If the thread doesn't stretch, the thread will break. If the bed sinks and the fabric needle was the wrong needle, then the fabric will rip on that seam. Some of you may have bought a garment before, wore it only once, and had all the seams shred and thought maybe you needed to lose a little weight, but it was the needle. The wrong needle was used. A sharp needle is like a sword cutting through your fibers. A rounded tip is what we want. Now, this is right when the stretch fabric released into the world. So this was early 70s when I met the inventor of the universal needle. And he had a concept of taking the regular needle and rounding it off. However, we had this binder full of sewing machine brands and models, and then the needle system that they used. And the needle system had to do with how long the needle was, whether it was rounded on the top or flat backed, how far down the scarf on the back of the needle was. And there was just, customer would come in and they go, I need needles for my machine. And we would have to flip through this book to find the needle. It was awful. It was a very difficult time in the sewing history, or in the history of the sewing industry. There's a piece of batting fuzz that just went into my mouth. Sorry. So what he decided to do was to round off the tip of a needle, and he's like, this is great. I've tested it, it works, but there's no way I'm going to make a rounded tip needle for all of the machines listed in that book. So what he did was he pilgrimaged and he went to all the manufacturers of sewing machines and had meetings with them and got them to all design their machines with the same needle anatomy. It was a huge accomplishment. And the only company that refused to go along with it was Bernina. So he designed the needle based on the Bernina's anatomy, and everyone shifted to the Bernina system or style of needle. Isn't that interesting? So when he created his needle, he then created other needles. Stretch fabric came out right after that, and his needle was skipping stitches, and everyone's needle was skipping stitches on stretch fabric. So he was trying to figure out how to make that better, and he did that by making the top of the needle where it goes up inside the machine flatter. And then instead of having the needle be so round, he also flattened out that needle. So a stretch needle is a very unique needle to all others, and it in essence is the same. So a 7511 stretch needle is the same size or diameter as a tin needle, except it's flatter and wider so that a thicker thread can go through the eye of that. And the back of the needle, the scarf, is longer, and that needle is like razor thin where that scarf is, so that when the hook comes around, it has a better chance of catching the thread other than missing the thread, because when a needle goes down into the fabric holds onto it, and as the needle exits, the fabric kind of lifts up with it. That's why there's a foot to hold down your fabric. Phew, it's hot in here. You love these stories. So the stretch fabric grabs hold of the needle even more than a regular woven fabric. It's like a rubber band, right? Especially when latex came out, when spandex came out. Oh gosh, it was just ridiculous to try to sew and get the sewing machine not to skip. All kinds of tricks were developed for that. And they changed the needle's style. And every time he did, he goes, well, I gotta have like a different name or identifier for the different needle types. And that's when the lettering system started. And he used H for light ballpoint. I have no idea. Maybe it was the letter of his first name. Could be that irrelevant. And then HS was light ballpoint for stretch. And it evolved from there. Well, Stretch or Schmetz, I don't know when it was. If Rhonda from Schmetz Needles is watching, what year did you guys switch from calling it light ballpoint to rounded tip? So it'd be nice to know that. And so just know that the terminology is really not as important as you getting that you do not want a needle that cuts through fibers. You want a needle that pushes the fibers aside. When does it not matter if you use a sharp needle? If the garment is never going to be worn by a human that has a body that moves, because that makes your fabric stretch. Another reason why you would not, it doesn't matter what needle size you use, is if the garment or the item is never going to be laundered. If in essence it's going to be a wall hanging, it really doesn't matter. If it's going to be a wall hanging, a piece of art, you can do whatever you want because it's never going to get stretched and it's never going to get washed. And then it's safe to just have fun. And that's when a lot of educators started teaching you to use sharp needles that already knew to use a universal or a rounded tip needle or ballpoint needle. They started telling you to use sharp needles because a sharp needle, because it cuts through all of the fabric, it gives you a straighter look, a cleaner satin stitch. So you could do applique wall art and you'd have a better looking stitch than you would if you used a universal needle. But then people forgot that it was only for wall hangings, and you started getting taught by people, especially in quilting, to use sharp needles so you get a straighter stitch, even though a straight stitch is the weakest of all stitches and not really ideal for making a quilt that's not going to fall apart. So what other technique can be used to sew a quilt together? I'm going to go ahead now and show you the stitch I would use for a memory quilt where it is sewn together a bunch of t-shirts sewn together. And you can do this with or without backing. However, backing a t-shirt is ideal because the cotton t-shirts tend to rot and decay and they get holes. So bonding it to a permanent fusible synthetic stabilizer makes it so your memory quilts will last longer. So the stitch that I'm going to use now, first I'm going to just show you overcasting. So let me do that. I got carried away. Blah, blah, blah. Are you guys having a good time? If you are, give me a thumbs up. And if you have a question, don't hesitate to put it in the chat. And those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so that you don't miss out on any of my lives or my uploads. And also be sure to check out create.clairerowley.com, my free online school, so you can participate and ask questions. And those of you who ask a lot of questions, let them know that you do get answers from me. Hi, Kim. I'm glad that you found the information informative. And so now I'm going to go to the close-up camera and switch to a regular zigzag stitch. Well, I'm going to show you two different ways. So you can use just a regular zigzag stitch and bring the guide of the needle over. We've already got our 1/4 inch stitch sewn, so we know that this quilt is going to, it's already pieced correctly for this size. Now we want to actually just overcast it so that it doesn't fall apart. So you can go ahead and use a zigzag stitch in varying widths because the guide on the foot adjusts. And basically we're just bringing these two fabrics together. Now I could have opened them up as well and done a stitch on both sides, which is what I would do if I were sewing a zipper in. I would actually put an overcast on both sides and then sew them together so that your fabrics don't fall apart. Pushing gently toward the foot, always keeping your hand to the side of the Satinedge foot. This foot fits every sewing machine, no matter how new or old. This is our 35th year in business. I'm 59 and I invented this foot when I was 19 for a blind and deaf sewer who was taking classes in tailoring at the Braille Institute, when we had a store called A American Sewing Center located in the San Fernando Valley of California. And the Braille Institute in Los Angeles was where she was taking her classes, and they sent her to our store because we were modifying machines for people with physical challenges as well as visual challenges, my father and I. My father was Don Rowley, the inventor of the Hoop-It-All. He also helped develop the in-the-ear hearing aid, low cholesterol egg, or low cholesterol chicken feed to make low cholesterol eggs, and the first electronic stethoscope. I don't know if I said that already. He did more than that. So there I have another way of having that sewn so that it will never fall apart. What was the other thing I was going to show you? Oh, you can also use a flat felt seam to sew things together. This is going to be the strongest pieced thing ever. So a felt seam, this is how we used to sew our seams together, by the way, because it was for sure your fabrics were going to fray. Okay, here we go. This is kind of a fun thing. It's kind of fun when I don't know what I'm doing before I go live. Hi, Sharon. Welcome. Hey, Judy, did you get your stupendous stitching book yet? Judy was last week's winner of the giveaway, and I've decided I am going to give something away. I didn't announce it because I wasn't sure, and I have decided what I'm going to give away. Ooh, I just heard thunder. I'm giving away one of these little ultimate thread dispensers, which works really good with our thread dispenser. It doesn't work on all sewing machines without our thread dispenser, so I'll explain the difference and you guys can figure it out and see if it will work for you. If it won't work for your machine, I'll let you switch to something else. So as you look at the thread dispenser, and this is what is always beside my machine. If you've ever seen me at a show, you know that there's always a thread dispenser by my side. The thunder was really loud just a minute ago. So I hear puppies. And if you're waiting on a thread dispenser, we were waiting for some of our wood parts and should have them by Monday. So if you order a thread dispenser today, it's going to ship next week. It's not going to go out tomorrow. So this device I created, I actually dreamt it. I went to sleep. I had a show, and every time I showed the double needle, then one of the threads would break on the machine. Raise your hand if you have your thread break when you use a double needle. And I know why it happens. So this stops that from happening. This is a dual cone stand feature, so you can hold two cones on the stand. Both of them have a eye hook, so you bring your thread directly up. So there's nothing hindering the unwrapping of the thread off of the cone, whether it's a big cone or a little cone. Now, that said, on the angles here, you can also just feed directly off of those at an angle to the sewing machine. And you can also feed off of these and feed straight. This is especially good for those trims that are flat, like the ribbon floss, or this is, I don't remember what this is called. Do any of you remember what the metallic sliver, the sliver thread? And it keeps the sliver thread straight as it goes to the machine, so it doesn't twist on you and create those little loop-de-loops that release in your tension and cause big loops to go up on your fabric, or your machine jams and makes a violent noise. So these little things that happen to you, this thread dispenser eliminates them. I still had trouble with metallic thread. This placed up here, and you remove one of the little vertical posts to fit it on to one of the top posts up here. And I didn't do that on this. It's my other one is set up that way. So you put it down here, and then you take your thread through, and it gives you beautiful tension, except for this thing spins so fast that you have to kind of slow it down. So if you use one of these, and this is a product by Wonderfil, and I don't think they knew that I already had the name, the Thread Dispenser. And so this is my thread dispenser, which is a patented product that I released in the early 80s. And this is their ultimate thread dispenser. So this in conjunction with this, and then you take the thread and you go weave it through a couple of these posts, and it'll slow down the speed that this unwraps. And then I had a beautiful experience with metallic thread. You can see that video in the Fabrically Speaking Live playlist inside of my YouTube channel. So for today's winner is going to get one of these. Now you know why I have this sitting out today. All right, in case that's been blocking any of your view. You should always be centered with your needle. I'm not, because I have a microphone and another light for the cameras, and that camera shines down, and so you should always center yourself. You'll have a better physical experience. You won't get that pinching between your shoulder blades. If you do a lot of this when you're sewing, the creative feet will eliminate that, especially if you have these little pillows to rest your elbows on. Free pattern inside of Create with Claire Rowley. What was I going to show you? Oh, felt seam. So felt seams is how we all used to sew our seams together. French seams, another term for it. You would take wrong sides together and sew a seam allowance, then cut down one seam allowance so that it's staggered shorter, then fold over that top fabric and then fold that over and then stitch again. It's what's on your blue jeans. If you have real blue jeans where it doesn't stretch, they still use that same method, because the sharp needle is used for blue jean, and that means that those blue jeans can shred at the seams. All right. So, because the Satinedge foot is so precise, you can actually sew with a smaller seam allowance to begin with, and encase it, and I'll go ahead and show you that now. It'll make more sense if I sew it. And so this seam allowance is wrong sides together and used a lot in bag making. So if you want to make a bag, if you want to make my zipper pouch, or I had a purse today. Where is it? On the table? Oh, well. It's, oh, here it is. In this bag lesson on inside of Fabrically Speaking Live. I think that's when I did it. I also have a decorative zipper application, but this is the seam allowance style used for this type of work. And I'm going to make a lot of little projects between now and Christmas, so you have gift ideas to make. If you have any particular gift idea that you want me to cover, don't be shy. Put it in the chat, but also even better, send me a private message inside of the school. And you can do that by clicking either on my name or the circle with my face in it. And you click say hello, and then you're in a private chat with me, and you can tell me what you'd like me to teach. It is the same French seam, felled seam. Also, I had this gentleman at a show, and he's all, can you do a French seam with that foot? And I said, yes. And he goes, because he's a professional dressmaker or shirt maker. And he goes, can I use that technique for setting a sleeve in, like at the same time? And I said, yes. And you should have seen him. He was flipping out. So that's what I'm going to show you now. And it'll make sense to those of you who've made garments before and had to do a French seam. In this case, instead of using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Using a center needle position on the presser foot, you can be as precise as before by taking a measuring tape and putting it beneath the foot. And we want to bring the guide then 1/8 of an inch away from the needle. For those of you who are wondering about the foot tipping, it tips because it has that whole screw assembly to carry around. It's like, how would you feel if you had to carry around a big item like that? So once it's when it's in the air, it tips back, which is kind of convenient when you want to look underneath. Then you lower the foot, and then when it's lowered, then you move the guide 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch away from the needle. And using a measuring tape gives you precision, so you can repeat the same exact experience. Now, I need it to be a little bit that way. So what do? I can take my needle and move it into the left needle position. Because you have needle position capability in addition to the guide's ability to move, you have a wide variety. You have, I don't know how many different seam allowances you can achieve, but there's a lot. So bring the needle down, don't go into the measuring tape, and now I can achieve that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Yes, you can buy the needles at creativefeet.com under sewing supplies and needles. And the H needle is the universal needle styles. It is also the same needle for the stretch, a rounded tip. Anytime you see the H and then another letter next to it, it is, and I'm trying to think, is this the direction I sewed it? All right, I've lost track of what direction I was sewing it. I need a dark fabric. I don't want to repeat. That's different than that, isn't it? All right, so wrong sides together. Oh, that's right. That's why I had that fabric. Because wrong sides together is wrong side up. You remember the large books of needles? Oh, man. I have flashbacks on that every once in a while. Not really, but I can remember it well, having to flip through those books and try to explain to people why it was taking so long. And then people go, are you sure? Are you sure that needle's going to work? Because I've been sold needles and they did not work. It was so disheartening. So wrong sides together. I have my foot set for an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Needle's too low. There we go. Always have the thread be beneath the foot and to the left. And I'm going to reverse on this because I didn't start on the edge. This quilt never gonna fall apart, you guys. I should use it for something other than just a placemat, but I don't have any little kids to sew for. Now, normally I wouldn't worry about where I place the glue, but since I'm using a narrow seam allowance, I want to keep the dots close to the edge. And because I'm using smaller dots, I'm going closer together, so about every 1/2 inch, and then slide your finger. This is our liquid-based glue if you're coming in at this stage, and this is September 22nd of 2022. The foot guides for me. I'm just pushing towards the foot, always keeping your hand to the side of the foot. And I'm able to go really fast because the foot's guiding the fabric, and I don't have to keep the fabrics together if I use the glue, which is not glue at all. It's water-soluble stabilizer in a bottle that's wet, and when it dries, it bonds these fabrics together. If it was stretch fabric that I was sewing, I would have a solid line going all the way down, and then both fabrics become non-stretch. The water-soluble stabilizer is wet when it is applied, and then it locks the fibers from shifting as you sew. It is your best friend. You can also use it to baste your quilts together. You'd put little drops on your batting, and you don't have to do any more drops than you would do if you were to put safety pins on your quilt. How often do you put a safety pin down? And it's really crazy for me. I was like, why are people safety pinning their quilts? You can't leave a safety pin and sew through it. And boy, you're certain to break a needle if you hit one of those. Also, gosh, how awfully painful is it to poke yourself with a pin? And how many safety pins does it take to baste a king-size quilt? So using the liquid baste on the batting, one little dot for every safety pin that you don't have to ever use again. So with fabric staying together, always keeping your hand at the side of the foot, pushing toward it. I'm getting hungry. What time is it? 3:11? I have gone an hour already. You can sew the new babies in your life. I can sew for your grandbabies? Is that what you're saying? So now you'll go, something's wrong. But what you do is you then, and this is one of those times when an iron is not a bad idea. Where's my presser? There it is. So what I really want is I want the seam allowance to be standing up. And I can do that by pressing one direction and pressing the other direction, and then it kind of stands up. Slide over, slide over. And you can also have spray starch used so that your fabric is tauter or has more body. I didn't do any treatment on this. And I bought this jelly roll probably 12 years ago at least. So I really don't know. I'm not sure if you can still get these fabrics, and there's no writing on any of the salvages that I can find. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes from Checker, because I feel like that I was in one of their events that they offered demonstrating. So now I'm going to take and fold this over, and what we want is we want to have these two fabrics lined up with each other. And then you just move the guide over. And you know that that's set for a 1/4 inch, and you've already sewn with an 1/8 inch, so there's no way you're going to have any of those raw edges popping out from the seam allowance. Another thing that I do is I grab my fabric like this and I rub it on a surface. Best on a hard, sharp surface. Camera's too close. See how I'm rubbing it on the edge of the machine? Rather than using the iron. Anything, well, here's the thing. I was doing trade shows for 30 some odd years, and there's no place for an iron at my table. So I had to come up with other ways of ironing, and this is one of the techniques I used. And I found it works better than an iron to get the edges to line up with each other. You know your 1/8 inch seam allowance is accurate. You never have to go and use the scissors afterward to grade it down. Hi, Roxy Diane. Is it Diane Roxy or Roxy Diane? Either one. My grandpuppy was called Roxy. There we go. All done. Now, it wouldn't hurt to take this to the iron, but I'm going to do it without it so you get the idea. 1/4 inch seam allowance will surpass the raw edge in there. Always have the thread go under the foot and to the left. I feel like that thread's not where it belongs. This is also a great method of making pillowcases. And the Satinedge Foot, I have an invisible binding technique which you can use in place of a burrito method. If you've never made a pillowcase, you don't know what the burrito method is about. Zoom. I forgot to turn off the phones. So how many ways can you piece a quilt? And isn't that... Now this one, you lose a little bit of fabric. So this piece is going to be narrower than the rest of them because of the folding over afterward. But isn't that a beautiful finish? And on our garments, we then used to take and press them down like this. And then you would sew a stitch to a top stitch or an edge stitch on the edge of that. Instead of stitching in the ditch, we would stitch to the side of it. Satinedge will allow you to do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and press. How many ways can you use the Satinedge Foot? I don't know. No fraying at all. And that is how we all used to sew our garments together before the universal needle made it so we didn't have to do that. And that was the beginning of this. That's when the Baby Lock Overlock was able to release to the world so that you guys didn't have to sew all of those different seam allowances. There's a little history of the sewing industry's evolution. And the Baby Lock name is not the same as the first Baby Lock Overlock machine. And I don't really want to do that. Let's see. I'll do a little top stitch down here. This foot is adjustable on both directions, or in other words, you can push this way or you can push that way. And that way I don't have to put all of this fabric into the inside of the machine. Take and bring the guide over to the other side. And then you can move your needle to the right needle position. I'll probably just go all the way down. It's going to be pretty anyway. Push toward the inside. Gentle though, not a lot of push. So if you've ever done a French seam and you were really slow on this step, this can be almost disturbing to see how easy it is with the Satinedge Foot. Look at that. Perfection all the way down. Isn't it beautiful? How many ways can we piece a quilt? You can also use a double needle to sew a quilt together. And that is the stretchiest of all stitches, is a stretch needle or a double needle. And then see how pretty that is on top. So is that enough? I think it's enough. I think that's enough for today because I'm getting really hungry. So you can see that this is just a tiny bit, a tiny, tiny touch on all of the different things that I'm going to be teaching in the Creative Feet Extensive. A lot of what you've seen me do here is covered in the Creative Feet Technical Guide and Workbook that you see on this table. That is available at creativefeet.com, that supports the Creative Feet. The book is not intended for you to use on other presser feet. Creative Feet are unique in that you have one foot that does lots of different things instead of lots of different feet doing only one thing. It's much easier on the brain. So perhaps next week I'll make this into something. And I really do want some new stuff for my living room anyway, so it's a good excuse. I'm also thinking about making some pumpkin, either a pumpkin shape placemat or placemats with pumpkin appliques on it. What do you think? Appliques or an actual shape of a pumpkin? If we do appliques, well, there's more techniques. I already have a pattern of a placemat with some pumpkins on it, and I have not released that pattern, so I think this year is the year for that pattern to release. But I think I'm also going to play around with making pumpkin shaped placemats. So I am about to announce the question. I've covered a lot. You're welcome, Madeline. So what question? I know some of you are like going, I'm ready. I want to win this. I try to make it fair, but I also try to make it hard on the regulars. Applique. And then it's like, if I do applique, I'm thinking maybe an applique where we stuff the pumpkin a little bit. Maybe Trapunto pumpkin, so you can use it as a hot pad. I can do, I could follow the pattern that I already have and then maybe do that later, another one. Because I sure do like using the octi hoops whenever I can incorporate them into a design. I like to do that. So all the things that I said. Remember, you have to answer the question in one reply. And when you see your name pop up in the chat is not real time. I am the only one who sees it in real time. So just because you see your name pop in first does not mean you won. I'm the only one who knows, because when you're hearing me say the word this, it's 30 seconds after I actually say it in real time. There's what's called a delay, and something that a lot of people are not aware of. So what? So many things I covered. All right. when is it okay to not use a rounded tip needle? Hurry up. Type, type, type. I gave you more than one example. I want the whole answer, not just part of it. Tinkerbell looks so cute. She's sleeping. This is September 22nd. And on not every episode, but some, if I'm organized enough, we have the giveaway. And in order to win the giveaway, you must have watched the show in order to have the answer. And the answer must be answered in its entirety in one answer, not an answer, an answer, an answer, an answer. That's just, I can't function that way. And during this lesson, I explained the importance of using a universal needle, rounded tip, also known as ball tip, also known as H-tip needle. And then I said, it doesn't matter when you are using it for blah, 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 because you do not, something doesn't happen. And now your questions or your answers are coming in, and I'm going to grab the first one. Almost, Judy, got part of it. But it wouldn't be, I mean, I guess you could make a garment that you never wear. But Madeline Ratkiss, when you are making a wall hanging, something that won't be stretched and washed. That is a complete answer. So Madeline Ratkiss. What is the question marks, Lorinda? And I'm double checking to make sure that no other answers were before yours. Absolutely. Madeline Ratkiss is today's winner. So, and this is September 22nd of 2022. Madeline, please reach out to me using our contact form at creativefeet.com. You can say, I'm the winner. That would be great. It helps me keep track. I will also announce it on this video in the description afterward, and also inside of the school. So if you're watching this and you think you won, and your name isn't Madeline Radkiss, you did not. You might have come close, but you didn't. You had a phone call and you missed. Ingrates. All right, you guys. I'm gonna try not to mess up on the close this week and I have a cord coming in for I think it arrived, but it arrived during the show. A cord for another monitor that I had laying around, and hopefully that monitor works. So next week I should be back to 2 monitors, and I think I'm gonna have to go back to an old version of the software for my OBS in order to get my buttons to work. But no matter what, I promise to have both of them functioning so that I'm a better educator next week. I hope that you found today's episode of Fabrically Speaking Live, which airs every Thursday at 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. We do not change our clocks, and it is coming up on Halloween. And that is about what time our time will seem to change, because you all will change your clocks unless you reside in a state that does not change their clocks. And it will seem as though I messed up and didn't come on at the normal time, but it is in fact you that changed your clock, and I do not change mine. So make sure that you're paying attention to that, and I generally will have a link. Today I didn't have much time before I went live. So you can always type into a search engine, what time is it in Arizona? Because Mountain Standard Time doesn't always show up right. I noticed that yesterday. Remember, if you want to enter the auction for my butterfly machine, which is 300 hours of painting. Make sure that you are subscribed to Create.Claire Rowley and that you join the group for the auction. And if this auction goes well, I have 26 other sewing machines that I may or may not decide to auction off. I have to have more space. We're just too many sewing machines around here. This is to fund more products for you. And hi, Karen. So the close is what I'm trying to do. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you've been in the live today, September 22nd, 2022, after I stop the live, if you go ahead and hit that like button again, it'll sure help my ratings in the YouTube algorithm. And if you've been watching on Facebook and I have not been able to see your posts, something's going on with Facebook today. And so things are completely different. I've not seen anyone from Facebook. It's not that I'm trying to leave you out. It's just something they're doing that messed things up. And I was told that by my software. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I sure hope you'll do so today. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love you.